and welcome to Corporate 911. And I'm your host, Dr. Eileen Jason, President and CEO of Arctic Consulting. I specialize in helping people become more aware of how they interact with others, team building, leadership development, behavioral assessments, and conflict resolution. I'm also a certified grief counselor. The show, what we normally do is we typically showcase two renowned business owners or consultants who provide invaluable advice to business owners and CEOs with issues that, frankly, keep them up at night. Today, however, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to devote an entire show to a particular topic with a very special guest. If it's not already, this topic should be priority to CEOs and business owners. We're going to discuss emotional intelligence, but we're going to discuss it both from an empirical perspective and a holistic perspective. We're going to discuss the components, again, of emotional intelligence. We're going to help you assess the degree to which you rate yourself for each component, and we're going to offer tips for increasing your emotional intelligence, again, both from an empirical perspective and a holistic perspective. So with that, let's begin by introducing my guest. Maryann Kelly, founder of Intuitive Services Insight. Following a successful 33-year corporate career working globally, Maryann made a shift to follow more of her intuition. She went from corporate executive roles immersed in meetings and metrics to being a medium, now understanding how the universal principles of metaphysics, energy, and intuition allow communications with those passed over and who are in fact very much alive. Maryann founded Intuitive Services Insight to provide mediumship, mentorship, and speaking services. Her unique combination of hands-on healthcare, business, and holistic experience enables her to help clients connect with passed-over loved ones, obtain insights about health, and apply intuition in business. Maryann delivers services with the highest integrity and compassion for her clients. She works with clients in person or remotely and enjoys hosting sessions about how to develop your intuition. Welcome, Maryann.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. I should also make note that Maryann and I have a history together.
Yes, we do.
We do. We worked quite a while ago in corporate America.
For several years.
For several years. We sort of went our separate ways after several years, and then reconnected recently within the last couple of years.
Yeah, and now we have even more in common.
We do, and I'm so glad we did reconnect.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Let's get started. Let's talk emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? So the term emotional intelligence, otherwise known as EI or EQ, was created by two researchers, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, and it was really made well known by Dan Goleman in his 1995 book named the same, Emotional Intelligence. We define EI as the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and also to recognize, understand, and influence the emotion of others. Truly effective leaders are distinguished by a high degree of emotional intelligence, which includes the components that we're going to talk about today. Yeah. And those components are self-awareness, managing emotions, motivating oneself, empathy, and social skill. So with that said, let's talk about self-awareness. So self-awareness is the ability to recognize what you're feeling, to understand your habitual emotional responses to events, and to recognize how your emotions affect your behavior, okay, and your performance. When you're self-aware, you see yourself as others see you, very importantly, and have a good sense of your own abilities and also your current limitations.
Right.
That said, I'd like to talk to you about your perceived self-awareness for those viewers as well. So we're going to do a little bit something different today. From an empirical perspective, I'm going to offer 3 statements. Okay? We're going to have the viewers listen to those statements, and then I'm going to ask them to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5.
Good.
1 being that it doesn't apply at all, to 5, meaning that it applies all the time.
Okay.
So the first statement that I'm going to read is, I realize immediately when I lose my temper. How do you feel about that, rating your scale from 1 to 5? The next item is, I always know when I am being unreasonable. And lastly, I can let anger go quickly so that it no longer affects me. Okay? Now remember, self-awareness is the first step out of the 5 that we spoke about in improving your emotional intelligence. This skill allows you to spot your emotions as they arise and not after the devastating effect sometimes that happens.
Right.
It also helps you anticipate upcoming emotional reaction by defining and being aware of the things that trigger you, okay? And that drive you toward those emotions. How about the responses? If you find that your responses, you or yours, viewers at home, on the scale anywhere between 1 and 3, then you may want to find out how you can work on improving your self-awareness. So Maryann, from a holistic perspective, how can you elaborate on the self-awareness component?
So I found that when I was working in the corporate world for 30 plus years, as well as now in my new path, working more holistically, when I'm doing readings with people or I'm coaching people, I'm finding that often as some of these, the self-awareness limitations start to surface, it's often because people rationalize their behaviors. It's very common, we all do it at certain points or others, but often when we rationalize, we're not getting to the root cause. So then things fester. And as the more they fester, the more they lead to stress. And then the more they lead to stress, then it kind of becomes a cycle there. So while my new path might sound very woo-woo to, you know, many in the audience, I'm a very practical person, so I typically like to see how we can make a change that has a practical application, because we're all living and breathing on this planet.
Absolutely.
Which is how we, when we reconnected, found that we had so much in common.
Absolutely.
Because we're both trying to come at the practicality
Exactly.
of this. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, from an empirical perspective, you can say, do this, do that, X, Y, Z. From a holistic, you know, you sort of realize the practicality of it, but there's so much more to it from a holistic perspective. So for me, from an empirical perspective, a good tip or a good couple of tips to improve self-awareness would be to recognize your triggers immediately. You know, and again, this takes practice. It's not going to happen overnight. A lot of people say to me, you know, fix it for me, do this. You can give them a piece of paper to read, but until they start practicing these things, then it's just not, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Take a step back from the situation and recognize your actions. Try not to be emotional about it. Just sort of look at the situation. It happened. Look at it and say, okay, how can I improve on it? You know, what can I do the next time, or if I'm ever in that kind of situation again, rather than just sort of being frustrated about what happened. You know, and then the more you do it, the more you recognize your triggers, the more practice it takes, the better off you're going to be. I find it important also from an empirical perspective is to write down your feelings during the course of the day. And not just in the morning when you wake up, but grab a paper. We all have our cell phones. Use the notepad on the cell phone. You know, write down what you're feeling and be honest with yourself. Write down exactly what you're feeling at that particular moment. Keep a track of that. You know, that way you can look back on it and eventually see what triggers you in particular situations. And recognizing the reactions will lead you to recognizing what triggers those reactions and ultimately therefore help you with your self-awareness. So what do you think from a tip from a holistic perspective?
So from a holistic perspective, some of the advice that I give my clients, which is on the same line of thinking there, is to become your own observer. When you can observe your reaction as you're speaking about, then you can look for those patterns and look for those trends. Because until we can identify those patterns and trends, then we're better able to figure out how can we constructively address them. And without this all sounding like theory, it's because we want to reduce our own stress, and which leads to illness, etc. And so it's really for our benefit, and it's not about necessarily, you know, changing the behaviors of others. It's changing our reaction to it, because that's what we have the most control over.
Yeah. Exactly. Very good point. You know, and that's, I think that stands true from both an empirical perspective and holistic, you know, is just, you really have to monitor your actions and don't take it personally, and, you know, don't get stressed out because of your actions, and you can't change someone else's actions.
Right.
You can only change your reaction to
Right.
them.
If you have your own little out-of-body experience and become your self-observer,
Yeah.
it then helps to take that emotional component away so that you can see things a little bit more clearly.
Yeah. And again, that's probably with practice, I would
Yes.
suspect.
Oh,
that,
yes.
Doing that firsthand
Yeah,
takes
it's
a
a
little
daily,
bit.
it's a daily practice. Yes, for sure.
Exactly. Well, good. So that's self-awareness. Let's talk about managing emotions.
Okay.
Okay. So managing emotions is the ability to stay focused, right? To think clearly and rationally when you experience powerful emotions. And sometimes, obviously, we all have been there. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not easy. But being able to manage your own emotional state is essential for taking responsibility for your actions, but can save you also from hasty decisions.
For
as
sure.
we all know, we have that email that we've all written back in the day, and you've hastily hit send
Yes.
and realized that that probably wasn't the best thing to do. We've all been there and done that. But from an empirical perspective, consider again, we're going to do 3 more statements.
Okay.
1 to 5
All right.
scale. 1 being, again, that it does not apply. 5 means that it happens all the time. So the first statement, I can consciously alter my frame of mind or mood. I can suppress my emotions when I want to. And I rarely, quote, fly off the handle at other people. I chuckle at that. Remember, managing your emotions is the ability to stay calm and control in difficult situations. It is not always easy, but it's highly valued, again, in the business world and outside of it. Keeping your emotions under control when things go wrong will set things completely different and on a different trajectory for you. If you find your response to any of those 3, again, in the 1 to 3 range, you might want to reach out and work on improving managing your emotions. So from a holistic perspective, can you elaborate again on the managing emotions component?
Sure. From a holistic perspective, managing emotions, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean becoming robotic. And I think that sometimes that's what the perception is, that people have to internalize, suppress, and become robotic. That's not what it means to me, certainly. What it means to me is being able to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, not only for your own benefit, but also for the benefit of others. And then you can also see, well, maybe there's other reasons for things happening. You don't necessarily have to agree with the reasons. But at least understanding what more is happening, to take that breath, which is, very wise advice at times. Not internalizing, again, means you're not just suppressing it and burying it, because it will surface, oftentimes unexpectedly, which we don't want. So we're trying to not internalize it and suppress it. We're not recommending having spontaneous externalizations or outbursts either. And not being robotic. So what's left with what it is, it's that taking a breath and taking a step back, because often things aren't nearly as intended as personally as we take them. And that really is the trigger. If we take it personally, it's triggering, well, what inside of me is causing that to happen? And if we can figure it out for ourselves, then we can make changes that help us. And it's not necessarily all about conforming to this, that, or the other. It's about controlling and helping ourselves be the best we can to be true to ourselves.
Exactly. And again, that's part of being self-aware.
Right.
Being able to understand your emotions, managing them, identifying them when they happen, and particularly under stressful situations.
Right.
I don't know about you. I know when we were in the corporate world,
Yes.
it was stressful.
Yes.
I think it's even more so now.
Yes.
I'm finding when I go out to clients, it's just a different environment. And managing, and I will include the political environment as well.
Right.
And sometimes that does creep into the corporate world a little bit.
Sure.
Any discussions you have with people. So those discussions are very sensitive, but people can sort of fly off the handle
Right,
sometimes.
right.
But once you recognize that and able to manage that, but you importantly said step back, see the bigger picture, and think about what the other person is going through as well.
Yeah, and I think what you and I are both trying to accomplish in our very collaborative ways that are complementary is how to make this all practical.
Exactly. Yep. So good. Awesome information. Let's talk now about motivating oneself. Motivating oneself is the ability to use your deepest emotions to move and guide you toward your goals. Okay. This ability enables you to take the initiative and persevere in the face of obstacles and setbacks. We're going to discuss a little bit about the motivating oneself. What we're going to do is, again, list the 3 items that we're going to have, and then on a scale from 1 to 3. And actually, we'll do that when we return from a commercial break.
Okay, sounds good.
Hi again, welcome back to Corporate 911. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, Maryann Kelly, founder of Intuitive Services Insight. Thanks for joining me again today,
Thank you.
Maryann. So we're moving on to, before we actually took a break, we talked a little bit about motivating oneself. Going to continue with that topic. And motivating oneself is the ability to use your deepest emotions to move you and guide you towards your goals. This ability enables you to take the initiative and persevere in the face of obstacles, which we've all encountered at one point or another. From an empirical perspective, I'm going to list 3 statements again. Again, same scale, 1 to 5. 1 meaning that it does not apply at all, 5 meaning that it applies all the time. Rate yourself. Our viewers can do this at home. I am always able to motivate myself to do difficult tasks.
Okay.
I am usually able to prioritize important activities at work and get on with them. Motivation has been the key to my success. Okay. Remember, motivating oneself is the force that keeps us pushing forward, even in the times where it's difficult. It's our internal drive to achieve, to succeed. When you think you're ready to quit something or you don't want to start something, our motivation is what actually gets us started. For those of you that took the little quiz, if you find yourself responding to any of those with a 1 to 3 scale, you may want to work on improving motivating yourself. Maryann, from a holistic perspective, can you elaborate a little bit on motivating oneself?
Yeah, so from a holistic perspective, motivating oneself often gets diminished because we fall back upon biases that are out there in society. And sometimes groupthink can be very helpful in terms of collaboration and coming up with even better ideas. But the opposite can be true as well. When we use as an excuse, well, everybody's doing it or everybody's not doing it, that's a form of bias, and it doesn't necessarily serve us well. So when we're going along with the group in the not so positive way, more aligned with biases, if we take a step back and say to ourselves, how is going along getting us along? Often it's not. So we may be with the pack, but that pack isn't necessarily going in the direction that we'd like to be heading. So as far as self-motivation, when we all have to kind of, have those days to, pick ourselves up by those bootstraps, as the old saying goes. And when I have those days, as we all do, it's like I'm doing it for myself. I'm not necessarily doing it for someone else all the time. And that's the best reason, because we're trying to further ourselves, which often is helping not only ourselves, but helping either the cause, our employer, our family, our friend, whatever.
Exactly. Good points, good points. So from an empirical perspective, I can give you a couple tips on how to motivate yourself. So making the commitment is first and foremost, to actually make that commitment. A fundamental part of motivation is being firm in our commitments. When we make commitments to ourselves and others, we end up, and if we end up breaking them, we send a message that, we're not making that commitment, we're not reliable, and we lack that perseverance. It's so important. And sure, breaking, promises or breaking commitments, it happens on occasion, but if we tend to do that more often than not, then, then we become unreliable, and then we actually, it's certainly understandable, but then people may perceive us as not being reliable, and it affects us personally, to not motivate ourselves. Backing out of commitments will suppress our ability to achieve our goals and also reduce our credibility, okay? So what tip can you offer from a holistic perspective with regard to?
From a holistic perspective as far as motivation, I also think it comes back to self-worth. If you look at a lot of people out there that have been respected leaders globally, they persevered not only because of the goodness that they might have been trying to achieve despite obstacles, but also they felt that they were worthy to take that charge forward. And it doesn't have to be something on a grand scale for every day, all of us, but I'm worth it, so I want to proceed, is reason enough to do that. So to not fall back on the biases and the behaviors necessarily of others that may not, again, be going in the direction that you're trying to get to.
Exactly. Self-worth is so important, and we find sometimes that it can be so hard sometimes to get that self-worthiness. Great discussion. We have a couple more items left. One is one of my favorite. The next to the last component of emotional intelligence is empathy. We all know, we've heard the word. It's the ability to sense, understand, and respond to what other people are feeling, okay? Self-awareness is essential to having empathy with others. I mean, I will tell you that I think this is probably the most important component, along with being self-aware. If you're not aware of your own emotions, you'll not be able to read the emotions of others. From an empirical perspective, I'm going to list 3 items again, as we did before, scale 1 to 5. First item is I am always able to see things from the other person's perspective. The next item is I can tell if a team of people are not getting along with each other. I can usually understand why people are being difficult towards me. It's a difficult question. Again, remember, research shows that our brains are hardwired for empathy, okay? As we get to know a person socially and professionally, understand what they are feeling, and not only that, but why, it becomes easier to put ourselves in their shoes. And I always say that, put yourselves in somebody's shoes. It may mean that you don't necessarily have had that opportunity to experience what they're experiencing, but put yourself in those shoes. Just see things somewhat from their perspective. And empathy builds trusts. There's no doubt about it. Without trust, other people will not collaboratively work with us, and we'll have no power to influence them, which is part of our next component. If you find your responses to the first or the one or the three, getting in from to the 1 to the 3 scale, you might want to work on improving your empathy skills, and this is probably one of the more difficult components, I would say, as well. So from a holistic perspective, how can you help us with empathy?
So from a holistic perspective, empathy, as you indicated, is being able to appreciate someone else's circumstances without necessarily experiencing those circumstances firsthand. So I want to give some converse examples of empathy where things go to the extreme in one way, shape, or another.
Sure.
So sometimes people that experience or feel too much empathy become the rescuers of everybody for everything. So that's a bit out of balance, because then they're not being empathetic to themselves or doing enough self-care. Also, somebody that is the observer of other people's situations and want to take advantage of that, they can become the perpetrator, where they're not being empathetic, but they're certainly aware, and that's undesirable as well. Then the other role is associated with respecting the situation where you're not taking advantage of, you're not being the victim, you're not being the rescuer. And when I get to the victim, what I mean by that is when empathy is, again, out of balance, you're the person that is always feeling vulnerable, constantly. So I give those 3 examples of kind of the extremes, because what we're trying to show is that I can be empathetic for your situation or someone's situation without necessarily feeling that I have to rescue everybody.
Perfect.
Without feeling as though someone has to rescue me in terms of being the victim, without being the observer of others' empathetic situations and taking advantage of them as the perpetrator. So I kind of wanted to kind of give a little bit of an opposing view, just to show how other roles in society can show themselves.
Gotcha. Well said. Yeah, definitely looking at it from another perspective gives you a clearer picture on what empathy actually is. So thank you for that. From an empirical perspective, I can give you a couple tips on how to improve your empathy. Again, practice developing empathy skills by focusing on the most difficult employee, your friend, person that you know. Focus on them. It's always easier to be empathetic towards somebody that you like or somebody that you care about, but it's a little more difficult to do it with someone that kind of provides you a little bit of a challenge. And then once you do that, walk in their shoes. Again, take a step back. Think about what their life is like or what they're going through at that particular moment. Listen better. You know, this is a big thing for me, listen better. And that doesn't mean when people say, I'm a good listener, but the fact of the matter is you're thinking about the topic or the next sentence that you want to say once they're finished talking.
Right.
So really listen to the person and really listen to what they're saying. Also observe their nonverbal cues. You know, sometimes when somebody's distressed or out of it, you know, they kind of start moving towards you or away from you rather, you know, and people that don't have that sense of empathy don't realize that that's really uncomfortable for them.
Right.
You know, so there's lots of nonverbal behaviors as well. And most importantly, ask someone you trust. You know, go to somebody that you trust and that has a good, you know, empathetic ear that does things well. You know, the ability to become self-aware and accept criticism or feedback, you know, is only going to help your emotional intelligence to begin with. So ask that trusted person from empirical perspective. What tip can you offer from a holistic perspective?
So from a holistic perspective, it's very simple simple to say, not necessarily simple to do. It's when I look at someone else, I try to see myself in them as a mirror. And when I find myself feeling uncomfortable, there's usually something that I'm observing that is triggering something in me that I'm not comfortable with. So I have to recognize that it's not that necessarily that person, it's something that I need to further grow in. So if you look at it that way, I think it helps to take away the discomfort associated with the other person, and it's illuminating for yourself.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah, illumination. That's perfect. Exactly. So now we're on to our final component. Now again, this is sort of, we did all of these and we're going to talk about the last component, but this is by no means, once you get this information, you're ready to go. Certainly there's a lot of work involved in helping, building emotional intelligence. So the final component that we're going to talk about are social skills. Social skills, the ability to manage, influence, and inspire emotions in others. Being able to handle emotions in relationships and being able to influence and inspire others are essential foundations for not only personally getting what you want, but for leadership as well, okay? And also from teamwork perspective. So we're going to go again with the final three, 1 to 5 scale again. I never interrupt other people's conversations. The next item is I see working with difficult people as simply a challenge to win them over. I generally build solid relationships with those I work with. So remember, from social competence takes many forms. It's more than just being sort of chatty and being the life of the party. These abilities range from being able to tune into another person's feelings and understand how they think about things specifically, because that's what you want to understand to get them to do things for you. All these skills are learned in life. We can improve on any of them we care about, but it takes, again, time, effort, and perseverance. So getting back to the 3 statements, if you viewers, if you took the little quiz, if you're, again, in the scale of 1 to 3, you might want to look to someone to improve those social skills. From a holistic perspective, you want to enlighten us on
Sure.
on that?
From a holistic perspective, social skills to me is bringing it all together, and it's bringing it all in focus. And it's not necessarily having a separate persona for business or for when you're, on the soccer field or, when you're, at home. It's when you can practice these more organically and consistently. And then it's not as much of an effort because it's true to you.
Exactly. Well done. Well said. So when we return, we'll take another break. When we return, we'll do our final tips for the social skills
All right.
and then wrap it up for the day.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Corporate 911. Thank you again, Maryann Kelly, founder of Intuitive Services Insight. We're going to wrap it up by talking about some social skills. I'm going to provide a couple tips for you to do as well.
All right.
It helps to have a model, again, someone that you know that does this very well, that embodies the skills that you want to improve. But we also need to practice, again, as a natural occurring opportunity, any opportunity you get to do that. It might be listening to somebody that you're not recognizing as the person to listen to, such as a teenager. Learn conflict resolution skills for social. Improve communication skills and learn how to praise others, I think is extremely important. So what tip can you offer from a holistic perspective?
So from a holistic perspective, as far as social skills, I have 2 quick things. 1, be the humble human. So being humble forces us or invites us to look at the other person's perspective. And the second one is I always have used my softest skills to solve my hardest problems.
Awesome.
So those are my final 2 tips.
Awesome. Very well said. Well, what a great discussion. I know we could have gone on for hours hours and even days, and our workshops are a little bit different, but certainly we can, do much more intense types of discussion. I want to thank you, Maryann, for joining me today.
Thank you.
I also want you to please tell our viewers, how they can, your last thoughts, any wrap up, and how they can get in touch with you.
So my website is Intuitive Services Insight. That's all one word. .com. The email is info@Intuitive Services Insight. And I do a collaboration of skills. Well, again, it's not all woo-woo. I do readings and connect with those crossed over, and I do holistic health readings and past life regressions, etc. I have a very practical application in how I do my work in all of its modalities to be the most helpful in everyday life to my clients.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, if anyone wants to reach me for more information or sessions, it's Arta Consulting, www.artaconsulting.com. My email is EileenJason, all one word, @artaconsulting.com. Again, thank you, Maryann. It was a very interesting subject. I look forward to hooking up with you again at some point.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Maryann. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll see you next time.
RVN TV